Record to this. Fantastic. Welcome, everybody. It feels so weird that I can't see you, but everyone is here, aren't they? Yeah, great,
Everyone's
great.
here.
Everyone's here. Um, Welcome to this event, which I'm really excited about running. This is a Q&A to ask a literary agent the questions that you've always wanted to ask, but perhaps have felt a little bit too nervous or felt like it really should be something you already know, or perhaps just haven't had the opportunity. This event was sort of dreamed up as part of Support Playwrights, which is a sort of group of playwrights and theatre makers who have come together to support playwrights during these difficult times. And I'll ask Jane if you can find it, Jane, at some point to add the Substack address for Support Playwrights, or maybe you can, Morgan. Please do follow us if you're not already following us, because we're doing lots of stuff like this. And this event is born of an initiative we ran called No Silly Questions, which was giving writers the opportunity to ask any questions that they may have felt too silly to ask, and we would try and answer them for you. Um, Absolutely thrilled to have Jess Jones, who works with independent talent, and Camilla Young, who is my agent, which is very exciting, and who works with Curtis Brown. And I'm going to introduce them properly in a moment. Just a bit of housekeeping up top. Yep, as I said, hopefully you should see five of us. Oh, sorry, and this is Morgan Lloyd Malcolm, as well as joining us to sort of get involved with the discussion, and Jane Christie, who is going to be very brilliantly helping to facilitate this whole session. Yeah, you should see five of us at the moment. In a moment, we'll take Jane out for the first part of this session. Um, yep, you've got your cameras off. Brilliant. Okay. The recording of this will eventually be uploaded to YouTube, and we'll be letting people know via the Substack. So you'll be able to look back as to what was said. This is how tonight is going to work. We did a bit of sort of work ahead of time to collate some questions from some of you. If you sent your question after 6:30 last night, we haven't taken that into consideration. So you may well want to ask that again later. But essentially, the first half of the session is going to be structured with Morgan and I chatting to Jess and Camilla about those questions. And actually, they're great questions which cover quite a lot of ground. Then we'll have about halfway into the session, we'll have about a 2-minute breather. And in that time, any other questions that you have that you may not have already been covered, or questions that you've come to the session with, we'd like you to pop into the chat. And then for the remainder of the session, Jane will brilliantly group those questions and sort of order them and feed them in to keep that discussion going. Do feel free to add questions as we go along, as well as they come into your head, but it may well be that we answer them in this first section of this discussion. And I think that's it. We've especially got a 90-minute bumper edition because we always run over when we do sessions like this that are 60 minutes. And I thought it'd be nice to have a bit of breathing space. So thank you so much for coming. Any glaring problems or questions, please pop them in the chat, and Jane will respond to you. But the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to ask Jane, if you can just unspotlight yourself as well. Thank you. I'm just going to ask Jess and Camilla to introduce themselves and just explain, just briefly, your journey to getting where you are now, today, and working as an agent as you do. Let's start with Jess, please. You're on mute at the moment.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Jess Jones. I work at Independent Talent. I've been working here for 4.5 years. 3.5 of those years was being an assistant to a senior agent called a Kenna, Obiekwe. And I still assist him and co-agent some of his clients and have taken on some of clients of my own as well. And I got into it by doing an internship when I was still at university. And then I started as a runner and climbed up from runner to literary runner to junior assistant, senior assistant, and here I am
Wow,
today. So
fantastic.
very
I
old.
already something new I've learned. I didn't know you had runners at agencies.
Yeah, we do. I mean, they mean completely different things. You can be fixing the printer to breaking down script and,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know, picking up an award for someone.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Jess. That's great. And Camilla, do you want to just introduce yourself and just tell us a bit about you?
Hi everyone, I'm Camilla Young. My most important job title is Anna Jordan's agent. Um, so
Yeah,
I've been at
that's the
Curtis
title.
Brown. That's my title, yeah.
Yeah.
I've been at Curtis Brown for 15 years, and actually before that, I was at Independent Talent too. But I started working with actors, and apologies to actors, but I just thought writers was was where I needed to be. So I moved to Curtis Brown and started as an assistant to for Nick Marston, who is a very senior agent who represents people like Conor McPherson and Enda Walsh. So I really learned through him. And then after about 4 years, I co-agented with him, built my own list, and now I have a list of my own, really concentrating on playwrights, but I also work very closely selling the film and TV and stage rights to the books that we represent. So that's another part of my job that I enjoy. So that's what I do.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And just to kick us off, I'm going to ask a question, because I think it's really important. If you were to describe to an alien or somebody who knew absolutely zero about the theatre industry or TV industry, what an agent did in a few sentences, what would you say? Anyone can take that.
I would say an agent is your editor, counselor, lawyer, financial advisor, friend.
Great. Yeah, I think all of those things are really important for sure. And Jess, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, totally. Further to what Camilla said, which is completely right, you're their advocate, the first sounding board, to everything that every idea that you come to, and also a gateway to connections within the industry, which is probably one of the most valuable parts of having an agent, is those bridges that you're able to take advantage of.
Yeah,
What things
sorry.
that I was just to lead on from that actually, to be really interesting, I guess, to some people on the call is what do you think is the difference between a writing agent and an acting agent, and what your jobs do in different, because the way that you get a job for acting or get a job for writing is so different. It'd be
Yeah.
lovely to be articulate that.
Well, for me, I found representing actors frustrating because you can't be that creative. It's a bit more passive. You have to wait for the jobs to come to you. Whereas with writing, you can keep writing whether you're employed or not, and you can create the work. If you write something on spec, then that's our job to sell it and find the best home. So I really enjoyed that part of it, that you can work with a writer and not necessarily make anyone any money for a bit, but with that aim. So it's just so much more creative um, and yeah, less. I'd say writers, their egos are slightly smaller as well, so you can actually have.
Not all of them. No, I'm joking.
I'm also going to say that if you're writing, you're at the inception of a project. One of the biggest differences is that actors come on at the very, very end. And if
Yeah.
you're writing, you're there, pre-green light, pre-development, pre-everything in those initial meetings. And, to get something that can finally go onto television or become a film, it's a beautiful process that lasts years. And actors are sort of the sprinkling at the end of
Mm.
a really long, huge process. And yeah, you're right. Writers definitely need a lot of patience.
Yeah.
It takes a while to get there.
That's really great to hear because I think that there's that thing about because I was an actor first, and so there was a thing about when I first had my first writing agents. It's like there's there's stuff that comes to you, and then they're getting you stuff like because that's the kind of in its most basic sense, I think a lot of people's understanding of an agent, and obviously it's lots more than that. But like as an agent, you'll deal with work that comes in for your clients. So you'll deal with contracts and dates and just making sure that 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 artist is sort of looked after and treated well, but also be putting their work out into the world as well. It's sort of a dual thing. Am I right? Or am I looking at that too basically?
No, that's absolutely right. And what I really enjoy is partnering writers up with producers or theatres, people that they're really going to collaborate well with. Whereas actors, it's less about that collaborative. I mean, you do collaborate, obviously, but you're a bit more for hire. Whereas
Yeah.
a writer and a producer or theatre or literary team, that's like a really important matchmaking process.
Definitely.
I was just going to say further to Camilla, the relationships that you make through those journals, through those connections, and when you're at the very beginning of your career, can last a lifetime,
Yeah.
which is really valuable.
That's such an important thing, isn't it? I think it takes being a bit older to realize that, that those 10-year plus relationships that you've invested in, those coffees you've had and stuff, pay off. They do pay off, but it's like sometimes you do have it is a long game, essentially.
Yeah.
Brilliant. That's a great way to kick us off. Shall I go into the first sort of question that we had come through, Morgan, and we can sort of take it from there?
Yeah.
Great. So this is really a combination of Neve, Susan, and Frankie's questions, who sent their questions in early. And really, this question is about when. It's a really big question. So when is the right time for a writer to approach an agent? At what point in their career? And I suppose it's kind of the same question, but slightly flipped. Is there a point where you think a writer is ready to be represented? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Great.
I'd say it depends on the agent and their stage of their career. So Anna, I signed you quite early on. I was building my list. You just won the Bruntwood. So hadn't done a huge amount of work, but I was at my stage of my career where I had more time. I wanted to dedicate that time to you, even though it was like early doors.
Yeah.
Now I've got a busy list, less time. So I would be looking for writers with a few more credits. So it completely depends, I think, on where the agent is in their career.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be scared to get in touch with an agent if you haven't had anything produced.
That's great. So would you say something that people asked about a lot is being on long lists and short lists of like the Bruntwood Prize and other writing prizes? I mean, is that a good time to write, do you think? Is that a good time to approach?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a great time.
Yeah, I also think it's good if it aligns with the research that you've done of said agent. So as Camilla was saying, if you are a little bit junior in your momentum within your career, then it might be best in your favor to approach someone a little bit more junior in, maybe from a big company, but they have just made the transition from assisting to agenting. And if you are, credited, then by recommendation, often agents are recommended by producers or friends within the industry of a particular person. So I guess utilizing those relationships. But I think it's also about momentum and whatever springboard you've chosen, be that a read through or a showcase or Bruntwood Prize or a full screenwriting, whichever scheme or competition. It's about how you want to use that to your advantage.
Yeah. I guess what about if there was a writer who'd been sort of honing their writing for quite a while and had like a couple of samples that they wanted to send in that weren't huge and unwieldy? I guess what I'm asking is, would you always want it to be on a personal recommendation or that they're shortlisted or longlisted for something? Or would you read and consider work from someone who just been honing their work and sending it into you unsolicited, as it were?
Yeah, I definitely did. I think a recommendation even when someone writes to me and said, I looked at your list and I love so-and-so's work that you represent. I'm interested in their journey and want to go on a similar journey. Would you I just someone who's done their homework.
Yeah.
So I think that really stands out. Someone who writes a generic email that has gone to every single agent, that doesn't really grab me. But someone who's really done their homework, then yeah, I think if their work sounded interesting, I would definitely read it if they haven't had those accolades.
That's such a good point about the homework, and because I think that relates to the fact that it's a relationship between, and like you've got
Yeah.
to be the right person for them, and they've got to be the right person for you, and finding that connection, because you're both kind of working for each other, as it were, and you're both kind of going to have that hopefully long-term relationship where you get on and you believe in each other's work and all that kind of
Yeah,
thing. So
what your tastes
making sure,
align.
yeah, it's got to be a good fit. So doing that extra work to just see who they represent and
Yeah.
sort of work they like is a good idea.
Would you say, Jess, with you being sort of reasonably recently transitioning from assisting to agenting, are you sort of in that point at that place in your journey at the moment where you are really kind of actively looking for people to take on? Or is it like a slow build of your list and sort of yeah, working your way into it slowly, I guess?
Totally. It's definitely a slow build. I will say, as a result of the industry, which I want to be inspiring but realistic, it's definitely getting harder out there. And I think most agents can attest to that, especially in the last 5, 6 years or post-COVID. But as I'm very much still working with Ikenna, there's definitely a caution towards who to bring on. Because, especially being younger in this career, I really want to give everything to who's coming up. It's really a dream to work with writers you're really inspired by and really care about their work. So yeah, definitely very cautious, very, very slowly. But the people I have signed, one was through, I saw their play in an upstairs of a pub theatre in Kentish Town, and another one was a read through in the basement of Soho Theatre for just one evening. And she had just reached out to me, having heard, not necessarily having heard that I had begun agenting, but yeah, she just done her research and thought that we might align.
That's great. Two things really stuck out to me there, actually, one thing that I hadn't really considered is I, I think it's really useful, that idea of like recommendations. Like if you're working, lots and lots of unrepresented writers will be working with directors already, will be working with producers. Speak to the people you have those good relationships with and say, do you know any agents that you would recommend me to, that you think I'd work well with? Like start to have those conversations with the people that you already have conversations with. Because I think one of the hardest things about this industry is, like, unless you're part of it, like an active sort of part of a connected network, you don't know how it works. Like I still don't know how a lot of it works. And the second thing that really stood out to me, which I think I often say this about development execs, but I also like TV development execs, but I also think it's really important to say about agents too, is like agents are human beings, like they're people. And I think that sometimes we kind of feel there's a thing about gatekeepers and this idea that there's a kind of wall. And I think sometimes we kind of go, we're just trying to penetrate that wall. I don't know where I'm going with my metaphors here. So we're trying to penetrate, and we just need to get in and we need to get our foot in the door. We forget that agents have different tastes and different things that they respond to, and also that they'll want to feel when you approach them that you've done your research, that you care about what it is they're interested in and what they do. And I just think that's a useful thing to sort of touch on. Great. Morgan, do you want to hit us with the next question? I've got one to sort of add to that later, but let's move on next. We've touched on it already, I think.
Yeah, I think it's about the approaching. So this is a question from Sarah, and it's also a bit of a follow-on from Frankie's question as well. But it's how do we approach? And I think that there's been a bit of a question come up in the chat as well about the sort of what you're looking for when you get an email from somebody. What is it that you're hoping? Is it just a few lines and a CV and a short sample, or are you looking for something specific? Like, for example, I was told recently by an agent that they were unable to really do much with theatre at the moment, and what they were looking for was people who had script samples for TV, for example, like because they could actually physically maybe get some work in that way for people, and they wanted to be able to do that for their clients. So yes, what's the best way to approach you is the question.
I was going to say, yeah, a description of like why you've come to writing, what you've been working on, what specific projects you wanted to share. I would attach the script to the email, and I would what you just said about having a screen sample as well as a play. I do think that's quite vital, and it doesn't have to be on final draft. But you're quite right. Getting new playwrights work right now is very hard, and it's really, really sad, but it's true. So if you want to be a paid writer, getting work in TV is going to be much, much easier, which is
Interesting.
even though a phenomenal play can get you in the door with a TV company, but they probably will ask, do you have a screenwriting sample? So it would be good to send a play and a screen sample if you have it.
That's really good to know.
And I guess in the body of the email, some evidence that you're trying really hard to be a writer, because I guess, I mean, this harks back to the question of when you're ready to have an agent. It's about about the agent and the writer meeting 50-50. Would you probably be a writer with or without an agent? There are so many creatives who are unrepped and working with production companies, not because of their industry connections, but because of their merit. So I guess just some evidence of that you're trying to make it.
Yeah.
And do name drop, I'd say, if you've worked with somebody, do drop it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
This just we had a question from Jackie which relates to this. Jackie asked, is it wise to double up and write the screenplay from a manuscript and submit both? So I think what Jackie's asking is it a good idea to write a screenplay version of a play you've written and then submit both? I think it sounds like. So what do you say to that?
I think I'd like to read another idea. It's good if you have that, but I wouldn't spend your time doing that. I would try and demonstrate that you've got two ideas in you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really good point. And like the scripts that I have that have been calling card scripts that are just still there and have never been produced or never been used, but they've been a useful script. Like you do have to generate quite a lot of samples of your writing for people to know, particularly when, if you're being considered for writers' rooms. If it's a thriller, then they're going to want to see that you can do thriller. If it's a comedy, they're going to want to see you can do comedy. So it's worth kind of, if you've got it in you to write those pieces, I feel.
Yeah, I think it's really, so I remember this from when I was first writing, like, you write a play or two plays or like a manuscript or a screenplay, and like it's everything, because the first thing that you finish is just, it feels like everything. It feels like your baby. It feels like the sum of your creativity. And so essentially what's often happening at the beginning of your journey is that people they are interested in you as a writer, but it's very unlikely that that first play is going to get produced or that first TV thing, which is why we spoke to Nicola Schindler of Key Street Productions and Red Productions, and she was just stressing the importance of the spec script, of like, and to be as creative and ambitious with that spec script. Don't worry about things like budget or would it get made, because it's about a calling card. Calling card's such an old-fashioned expression, but like it's about showing us what you can do rather than going, this is what I want to get made. And I think that when you're moving through your journey as a writer, it's important to make this connection that it's you, the writer, not this one project that you've got and it's sort of finite and you've run out. Like that an agent in particular is investing time and energy in you as a writer rather than your baby project or whatever. Yeah. What did we talked about source, what materials to send in, didn't we? I think, Camilla, you were saying about
attaching the script. Yeah,
yeah.
I attach the full script, not a short sample. Attach the full script
Okay,
to
brilliant.
just to show that you have more than one idea.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a useful question, like no silly questions question. Do you read a full script, or do you have people that read and then pass to you, or do you read the first 10 pages? Like, how much would you read a whole script, basically, is the question.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure. I mean, it also depends on, oh, sorry, Camilla, you go.
I was going to say, unless it's terrible, then I probably but if I'm enjoying it, then of course I'm going to read the whole thing.
Yeah.
You can tell in the first 5 to 10 pages,
Mm.
you know, if it's going to be a good script and if it's exciting and ultimately, you know, if you're going to progress in your writing career and you're going to have new eyes reading your script, if there isn't that impulse to keep on reading it, it might be a taste thing, and every agent really does have a very different taste. But you know, if it's not really readable, then yeah, we probably won't carry on, but definitely read the whole script always. And I also saw a little question pop up. I know you're collating them later of, is 30-minute okay, 60-minute okay? It can be a pilot of any length as long as it's completed. It can be a feature. And as Camilla said, if it's a play, that still works, but it's just a little bit harder to sink your teeth into if it's not, you know, a reading or if that's your only sample.
Yeah. Would what about if you had a play and you had a TV idea, but you hadn't written the script yet, or vice versa? Are you interested in seeing one pages or treatments, or are you more kind of like, I want to see a full script?
I think I'd want to see a play, a screenplay, and any other ideas you wanted to share.
Right.
Because I guess this is with reference to, you know, if you're not if you're sending something completely blind, and if there isn't you know, I'm inviting you to my reading or my showcase, I think you're just putting yourself in the best position having that screen sample.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And when are there any do's or don'ts when people are inviting you to readings? Something I hear a lot from writers, but and for actors, is the frustration of like having a reading and it being really difficult getting industry along. But I think it's hard because people have incredibly busy lives and you know, but and you're invited to so much. But are there any do's and don'ts in terms of inviting yeah, to readings or one-off performances or runs or whatever?
I don't think there are any don'ts. I was going to say I would extend the invitation to their agent and their assistant because I often send my assistant to readings. And if she says she thought it was great, I will read the play. So yeah, be inclusive in your invitation.
That's great. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also would agree. I don't really know any don'ts. I think, you know, if people have had enough gumption to put on their own show and it's really hard, you've had to raise money, you've had to, you know, put yourself out there. I usually find that those invitations are filled with personality and what the show's about and
Yeah.
copy and exciting. So I just feel like believe in your work, and yeah, it will probably translate. I go to a lot of those, to be fair.
And
That's great.
do you go to like the Edinburgh Fringe Festival or Brighton and Camden Fringe and all that? Is just sort of where are good places to invite you to for people to know?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Edinburgh. I mean, Edinburgh is becoming increasingly harder to get a show up there. But definitely Camden Fringe. I know there's the Red Lion Pub and Angel, and they've got a great theatre upstairs. You've got the Lion and the Unicorn upstairs in Kentish Town. There are loads of spaces. I think like the Hen and the Chicken and Angel. Yeah, well, I really there's loads of spaces around London, pubs especially that hire to amateur writers. And I've seen that space utilized 1,000 times. They're really great.
Yeah. So a reasonably central location, if possible.
Sure, sure. But also, I think we all have the understanding that it's really hard to get your work out there and it's becoming increasingly harder and increasingly more expensive. So you know, that we do understand that, I would say.
And what about a recording? Like if you were unable to attend in person, would you be interested in seeing a audio or video recording? I think it's difficult sometimes, isn't it?
I always ask for that if I can't make it.
That's great.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. I think we've covered that. Do you think, Morgan?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, my next question was, what's your approach to working with disabled clients, particularly when energy limiting conditions or other factors might mean a writer has to work at a slower pace?
I would say be very honest with your agent about your disability. Don't shy away. Your agent can help you if they know everything. And I mean, writing is such an excellent career if you do have a disability because, I mean, A, you can do a lot of it from home. B, a deadline can be moved often. If you need more time, you just need to let us know and then we can have that conversation and give you as much time as you need. And if you need to go to a meeting or be in a writer's room, then I think the industry now is really well set up, I hope, to support anyone who has a disability.
I would agree with that. I work with two disabled clients. One of our clients, Matilda Rubini, has muscular dystrophy. She also won an Olivier last year, which we're very proud of. She's really fantastic, and she has to deal with a lot of health complications that pop up. And from what I've seen, the flexibility that production companies and theatres have extended towards her has been really wonderful, but also right and expected. And yeah, I think the industry is certainly becoming like increasingly more adaptable, and Matilda's been in yeah, many writers' rooms and has taken them online. And yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. There's lots of, yeah, I think there's like a disability screen advisory group that yeah.
Yes, I remember being in touch with them recently, but I can't remember their name because I can never remember anything. But we'll try and look that up and pop it into the chat. That's really great to hear. So I think like what really stuck out to me there was about being honest. I think sometimes when we're afraid that something might impact our chances of career progression, we try to hide it. And I think that's you're saying the absolute opposite, really, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. Honesty is key. And also it can be your superpower because, there are TV shows being written about people with disabilities and they need writers with disabilities to join the room and write an episode.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
To share that information because it can get you work.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? Like I find generally in writers' rooms, that I will always I think it's important to try and look at the different characters that you're sort of creating or, bringing in and thinking about, well, could they have a disability, and so if you are creating a show with disabled characters, as Camilla said, you are really going to want to be able to have writers in the room who can speak to that and who can give like an authentic experience of that, which is really important. So that's great. And that thing about being honest, I mean, it's a different thing, but like sometimes, Camilla, I'll say to you, oh my God, like I'm not going to be able to get that in. And like I can't finish it. And and you'll just go, all right, I'll just get you some more time. And I'll go, really? You can just do that? And you're like, yeah, it's fine. So I think sometimes as writers, we're just like, oh my God, I can't do this, I can't do that. And then, we're human beings, aren't we? Fantastic. Where are we at time-wise? We're doing really well. Morgan, did you have any other? Did I get you?
I think there was one other question which came in from somebody, which was, it's a really interesting one, but it's like, how unsuccessful do you have to be for an agent to fire you? Which is quite an intense question, but it's one that we all worry about. I mean, I've been with my agent since 2003, so I've been there a long time. So I kind of feel like I've got my feet under the table. But I know I have friends who've lost their agents for whatever reason. And is there have you fired people? Like, why would you fire somebody? And yeah, what usually are the reasons? And maybe fire is the wrong word.
Yeah, I think fire is the wrong word.
Uncoupling is probably the best way.
Conscious uncoupling.
Yeah, conscious uncoupling usually is what I don't think fire is quite right.
I don't think unsuccessful is the right word either. I would only ever uncouple with a client who I didn't think was putting the work in or wasn't trying and maybe finding it frustrating.
Yeah.
And you can't sit at home and wait for work to come to you when you're a writer. So if you're not writing and coming up with ideas, there's not much an agent can do for you. So those are the only reasons I've uncoupled. Sometimes the personality clash as well, because it's a really close relationship. And if you're not gelling, you might have a lovely first meeting and then sometimes you just don't, it doesn't work. So sometimes it can just be a personality thing.
Yeah.
Lots of examples of writers who have left their agents and gone to another agency and it's worked out well. And just because it hasn't worked out with that agent doesn't necessarily mean that will impact your career. It might just be, as is with a relationship, an incompatibility.
Yeah, definitely. Another part of that question was, do people ever move agents within agencies? Does that happen?
I've had that a few times. I think if you're a valued client, but it's not working with a particular agent at the agency is going to fight to keep you. So they're going to try and introduce you to another agent in the department. And that's happening.
I suppose maybe what's the question behind the question is, what if a writer is putting in all of the work, but the work doesn't come to them? Does that make sense? And I think that's the thing that you have to really hold on to, right? Is that if you're not getting your work produced or you're not getting in writers' rooms, so you're not getting stuff made, it does not mean you are a bad writer, right? Like it really doesn't. But is there an instance, or could there be an instance where a writer wasn't getting the work that they deserved, like they weren't working, and essentially that meant that you might have to uncouple with them at some point?
I guess so. I mean, so much of this business is actually not about writing. It's about whether people want to work with you. So a lot of it is about your personality and how well you work with others. So people can be spectacular writers, but if they're just not good at taking notes or working in a team, then that can really hold them back. So yeah, that's could be one reason.
That's great.
And I guess there of course can be fallibilities on us as the agenting side. But I will say, behind, if a client feels neglected and neglected by the whole team, that technically can happen. It is rare. But yeah, I imagine those scenarios that I've seen have always been a result of like a lack of work. I haven't seen a writer be really forthcoming in that not been rewarded or recognized. I haven't seen that from my side yet, but yeah, I have seen the things that can be incompatible for sure.
And sort of leading on from that a little bit, just out of interest from your perspective and your point of view as agents, because the industry obviously shifts and changes all the time, and we went through some, it was very tough during the pandemic, but just before the pandemic, there was a lot of push for greater diversity, better equality, all sorts of things that were happening, and then it seemed to sort of all tip away, like disappear after the pandemic. And I guess one of the barriers to people getting jobs or getting commissions are these inequalities within the industry, where it does seem to favor a certain kind of person to write a certain kind of thing. Are you, as agents, generally seeing that? From our perspective, I guess it feels sometimes like we've gone backwards, and it would just be really interesting to hear you talk a little bit about what you're seeing, about what's coming in for your clients, what's available, what's what commissions are out there and what you're seeing getting made. That would be an interesting perspective, I guess.
Yeah. From my perspective, I think there is still a drive to have as many diverse writers in a room, but those diverse writers have to have credits to their name. So they need experience rather than be a white straight man. It's
That's sort
about
of
experience, really.
yeah.
Sometimes those two things go hand in hand. But at the moment, I'm finding a lot of in TV specifically, they're looking for a very experienced showrunner to take over a project that's been brought in by a new writer because they don't think commissioners will give the new writers the opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's maddening. And that didn't used to be the case so much. I'd say the BBC used to be a bit more risky
Yeah.
with greenlit.
With that, in that instance, I mean, I sort of went through something similar myself, but that was also me sort of saying, I don't think I'm ready for this. Someone come and help me. So it's slightly different. But on those occasions, are the newer writer that maybe bought that project, are they still involved in the project in some way, or sometimes they're sort of shifted off completely and a more experienced showrunner brought on to take over completely?
Kind of different in different occasions. You wouldn't, yeah. I mean, if I represented the young newer writer, I would fight for them to have a role, but
Yeah.
they probably wouldn't be the showrunner.
Yeah. It's a very risk averse market at the moment, I think.
Moment, yeah.
I've never said anything like that in my life.
Yes, and I was also just going to mention further to, how does it feel post pandemic, diverse writer-wise? Do we feel those doors opening or do we feel a shift there? I would say working with, a majority diverse list that absolutely I felt a huge shift. I mean, the range of shows not only being made by different voices and amazing women as well, thematically super diverse, which means that you have to have writers from a particular background to be able to lend an authentic narrative to that. So I'm feeling quite hopeful on that side actually, which might sound naive, but from what I've seen come through, it does actually seem quite exciting, and we're not there completely yet, but I do feel like we're moving in the right direction.
That's really good to hear, and it's also useful to hear because I think that your perspective will be from the inside. You're seeing these things happening in a way that maybe us writers on the outside looking at jobs that we're not getting will go, or jobs that our friends are getting will be going, oh, well, there's just no jobs. But actually, you're seeing these jobs happening and going to great people. So I think that's really hopeful to hear. So
It
thank
is
you.
really heartening, isn't it? Yeah, we just don't, I think it's impossible to get a real sense. People will often talk to me about the industry as if I know exactly what's happening in the industry. And it's very hard if you are a writer and you're sort of on the outside of it to have a grasp of it. So it's really heartening to hear you say that. I just had one more thing before we sort of take a couple of minutes, quick breather, and then we sort of Jane starts feeding the questions in. That actually related to an earlier question, but something that's really stuck out to me is that I don't know if you'd agree with this, but it feels like it wouldn't, like before I signed with you. I mean, I had other agents before I was with you, Camilla, but like I wrote for a long time. I self-produced. It was very different. It was much easier to do it back then, but I self-produced loads before I got signed by an agent. And it feels like I always talk about a writing journey rather than a writing career, because career, I think, suggests money and it's not always there. Like it's but it feels to me like, as we've talked, that an agent isn't necessarily someone that's going to be there from the very beginning, and it isn't appropriate. Would you say that that's right?
It's not appropriate to have the same agent.
No, sorry. What I mean is that like you've just started, maybe you've written one play and you've got very little sort of stuff behind you, experience, and you've written very little. Then I think quite often people think, I want to start a career as a writer, I need to get an agent. And it's like, but it's like building up a body of work, building up experience, building up contact. And then it feels like it's the right time for an agent. Would you agree with that? I mean, I suppose I'm going back to the initial question.
Yeah, I would also say the realities of what, and I won't say, well, I will say a writing career in the sense that, if you end up writing on TV shows or writers' rooms and the commissions start coming in, there can be really quick turnover. You're going to have to be an ideas factory essentially and develop the kind of flexible mind that is able to jump into another person's format, another person's idea and run with that and create a storyline and I think, as you've said, it's about just writing as much as possible and committing to that journey if that's the career that you want. Yeah, and obviously it is a little bit harder now, but it's certainly possible, and I've seen it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I was just, and that sort of answers Emma Dawson's question, which was about giving advice for playwrights who can't apply to be agented yet because they haven't got the production credits. I think we've sort of covered that it's not necessarily production credits that you need, but to have sort of experience of writing and applying to things, making connections, and contacts, I guess. But I mean, I just think writing's the big one, right? And it sounds so ridiculous, but um, I know a lot of writers who don't write that much. And I was quite like that when I first started. Oh, I'm a writer, but how much are you actually doing? But that was back in the day. Okay, let's just take so for everyone that's in the room, we're going to take just a couple of minutes. So if you need to go off to the loo or whatever, that's absolutely fine. But do take this opportunity to pop any questions in the chat that you may have, and then we will try to get through as many of them as possible. So it's now 7:49. Come back, or you don't have to go anywhere, but like we'll come back together at 7:51. And yeah, we'll just, and Jane, if you can just be looking through the questions and I'll have a little look now, and we'll see people in a couple of minutes. Okay. Great. Actually, I'm going to just pop to the loo. Great. Mini break. Do you want people to unmute? So no, Jane, if you can spotlight yourself now, come into the fold with us. And no, I think what we'll do to be most time efficient, Jane, is we will get you can mention who has asked the question, which would be great. But then if you feed the question, and we'll have and we'll ask Jess and Camilla and have the conversation. I think that's the quickest way to keep it moving because we've got lots and lots of we've got like yeah, 53 participants. So we've got lots, I'm sure we've got lots of questions to get through. So I'm not wanting to engage people in the conversation, but I just think keeping it moving, getting through the questions in the chat is probably the best option. So Jane, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, definitely. So Emma's question around how to research who the right client is for you. So she's mentioned that some people have their client list on their website and some don't. So if they don't, what's the best way to do that?
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Camilla, you go.
I was just going to say on it, Curtis Brown's quite transparent, but I know independent talent is like a secret.
Yeah, I was going to say it's really agency dependent, and I admit it can be really hard at independent to figure that out. But there's a lot on IMDb, which I think is a nice loophole.
That's really good to know. Yeah.
And if there's a writer that you really love, then you can just Google that writer and agent, and then you often can find the information online.
Yeah, I think it's so much, and it can be you're watching a TV show that you really love the writing, that then you look up who wrote it, and then you look up who their agent is. Like,
Yeah.
I think in some ways it's a double-edged sword, but like, because I very rarely now just watch TV and go, oh, this, unless it's Traitors or something, I very rarely watch TV and go, oh, this is just purely for pleasure. But like as a writer, when you are watching TV shows, dramas, comedy, whatever it is, you're feeding, it's feeding you creatively, but also like who was involved in that? Who was the production company? Who, and just making that journey, making those connections, I think is a really good shout. And IMDb, I hadn't thought of that at all, actually.
And also ask people out for coffees as well.
Oh yeah, can you talk a bit more about that, Jess?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've had a lot of writers ask for advice and ask for coffees, and I think in the first instance, rather than an elevator pitch, just trying to gain a rapport will just stand you in best stead for, forming those relationships. We've spoken a lot about that, but
Yeah,
good one.
so you might have a career with like a really early, you might have a coffee with a really early career writer who maybe you'd seen or read something that interested you or maybe weren't ready to sign them yet, and like just have a conversation and give them advice.
Totally, or a phone call, either one. Yeah. And if they are, it's a shame that this is a part of it because you think writing inherently shouldn't have to be related to networking, but I can't emphasize enough how good just getting a little bit comfortable with a healthy bit of networking can help.
And you can do that with people who work in literary departments of theatres or like development execs. Just, yeah, if you're watching a show that you like, see who produced it, drop them an email, just say, I'd love a bit of advice. And, you might be ignored, but there'll be a few people who will do it. And then those people sometimes write to me and say, I've just met a really brilliant new writer. Would you look at their work? And then like straight to the top of my pile if they're recommended by a producer.
Yeah, that's great. Great.
Can we move on to, there's quite a few questions around this about multidisciplinary artists. So if you're also a writer and a director, or you're a writer actor, and then also specifically if you write plays and prose, would you represent the same, and would you be interested in multidisciplinary artists?
Yeah, I look after a few writer directors or writer actors. So yeah, it's all about the writing really. Or I mean, I represent writer directors for their directing too. Yeah, it's quite a fun part of the job to look after multidisciplinary. I always get that word wrong. One of my colleagues actually specializes in comedy writer performers. So there are some agents who specialize in that.
Yeah. Would you, I don't think, maybe I've got the question slightly wrong, but so you represent Dolly Alderton, don't you?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a big part of my job is representing novelists turned screenwriters.
But their novel is dealt with by someone else.
Someone else, yeah. So
Within
that's what's
Brown, or can it vary? I expect it varies.
Sorry, say that again.
Would it be within Curtis Brown, or can it vary?
Yeah, mostly the novelists I represent who also screenwrite do come from Curtis Brown or C&W, which is like a boutique agency attached. But yeah, I could also represent people from outside. But that's what's nice about going to an agency. If you do different formats, go to an agency that represents has different departments covering different bits of your job.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's great. Did you have anything to add to that, Jess?
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say as well, we also represent writers who have an acting agent from another agency, which is really common as well. And I don't think one impacts the other. There's a good relationship there. It's about what's best for the client. But as a literary agent, it's about the writing ultimately is what we can help with and we can advance.
Great, thank you.
Can we talk about writing partnerships? There have been a few questions around either if you've been writing mainly in a partnership, could you be signed on your own, even though most of your credits are as a partnership? And then also, do you take on partnerships in general or just single writers?
Yeah, I represent a few partnerships and I represent a few people in partnerships, but I only represent half of that partnership. That's quite common.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, so because I don't really know how it came to, because I don't know, they just wanted, I mean, sometimes it's quite useful because they get two agents kind of for the price of one if they always work together. So yeah, it's up to you how you want to do it, but it doesn't put me off, definitely not.
Yes. Did you want to add or should we move
No,
on?
I honestly agreed exactly the same. Exactly the same. It's really common.
There's writers out here there who only write with other people, like one other person. I just can't imagine it. I don't.
Intense relationship. I represented a married couple who wrote together on everything.
Wow. Are they still together?
They're still together, yeah. They're not with me anymore, but they're still together.
Something had to go.
Yes.
That's where I started. I was taken on in 2003 because I was part of a comedy troupe, and we wrote together for about 5 years, and then we kind of slightly disbanded. We still worked together, but we slightly disbanded, and I started doing my own thing. But yeah, I was only represented as a three for a bit.
Oh wow. I'm just writing with somebody for like on a TV project for the first time with a friend of mine, Amy Mason, and I love it actually. I'm really enjoying it. I'm really like what we've created, but I stepped into it very cautiously because I don't know. I hate myself when I write. So I can't imagine what it must be like for someone else. Like I don't hate myself, but I get so frustrated with myself on so many different levels.
If you find the right person to work with, if you complement each other, it means you can lean on each other, and it means you don't have to do the stuff you don't like writing. If they
Yeah,
do that, then you can do the stuff that you like. Like it, if you find that right combo, it's brilliant.
yeah,
Brilliant.
fantastic.
Can
Jane.
we shift it slightly to regionality? So there's a lot of questions around kind of if people are based regionally rather than in London, would this at all put you off representing somebody? And then also kind of off the back of that, questions around that they said there's been loads of great suggestions around inviting people to script readings and shows in London, but do you ever travel outside of London to see things? Specifically Wales, we've been asked. This feels far, but potentially not.
I would definitely, I mean, I represent writers who live all over, and actually since the pandemic, very few of them live in London now, so that's really not an issue. Zoom is a wonderful thing. I have one writer who lives in Bangkok and he hardly ever comes over and he's doing very well. So
Wow.
I can get away with living anywhere in the world as a writer, as long as I guess you're willing to get up or in the middle of the night sometimes for a meeting. So that's not an issue. I guess inviting someone to a reading far away might be challenging. I only would if I were going for another reason. Well, for me personally, I mean, I have kids. I don't think I would travel very far for a reading, but I might have done back in the day.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. I think, in that case, if you're not based in London or around London, I definitely suggest investing in some recording equipment because that is just as valuable. Make sure you've got a relatively good sound technician because it's really heartbreaking being sent yeah, a recording of something and you can't hear it properly. So just make sure you've got those, make sure you've got that covered. But yeah, I mean, we also represent writers from all over the UK, and some live in the US, some live in Portugal. And yeah, I mean, in terms of regionality as well, there's also lots of schemes that are targeted towards different parts of the UK, because there is an acknowledgement that, it's easier if you're in London. But I think that is trying to change a little bit. You've got New Writing North and New Writing South and Screen Island, and yeah, just it's a good deep dive on Google of all of those schemes that are regional. There's lots of good stuff out there.
It's really good to hear that, that it's not, obviously some things are easier if you're in London, but like that it doesn't put you off if somebody wasn't like available at the drop of the hat, to meet with someone. And I think Zoom is a really wonderful thing. I think something we try and do with Support Playwrights, something we've talked about, Morgan and Jane, is like this idea that if we do an event, we try to have at least an online version or portion of it. So when we had the Playwrights Christmas party, we had like an hour's kind of festive, creative check-in. So the party was at the Royal Court, but we like cordoned off a little bit. It was pretty loud actually, but we cordoned off. You did it as well, didn't you, Jane? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but it's like to make it accessible, right? So we're talking about it from a different sort of perspective. But I think it's really useful to go like, when you put together a reading, whether you've had rehearsals, whether you've paid for the space, however you're doing it, you've put so much time and energy and effort. And yes, theatre is fleeting and theatre is like live, and that's the very nature of it, I think. But it's worth, really having a think about how could you record that. And I think it's hard, isn't it? Because it's not always easy, and you're not always able to afford like recording equipment and stuff. But I think with a bit of research or perhaps calling in some favors, you should be able to find a way that is, that can record something satisfactory. So I think it's really worth sort of thinking that way if you're creating work anywhere, but especially out of London. I remember we had a little question that had come in, and it did come in after 6:30 yesterday, so we didn't include it in the initial thing. But it was from someone, I don't know if they've asked this in the question, who was talking about being a US writer and wanting to break into UK theatre. Is that in the chat at the moment, Jane? Maybe, I don't know if that
No,
right.
it isn't.
Right.
There hasn't been one. So yeah, do you want to follow on?
Do you have any experience of that at all? Or is that something that you have any sort of feelings or thoughts about? An international writer approaching British agents?
I haven't specifically had an experience of a US writer, but if I mean, there's no reason why I wouldn't be interested in helping them get their play on in the UK. It's, it's all, as we said many times, it's all about finding your network, and I'd be happy to help someone build relationships over here.
Yeah. I guess it's like there's so few opportunities, isn't there, that I think it kind of feels like I imagine that opportunities are less for an international writer that is starting out. Whereas if they're established, then obviously there's going to be lots of interest in their plays. But if they're starting out, I imagine it's pretty difficult to break into, and I don't really like that term, but like to establish oneself in a different country. I don't know. What do you think about that, Jess? Jess, did you have have you got any experience of that, or of people writing in from international destinations or anything?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly have international clients who want to work in the UK, but I guess there's usually some UK connection or some reason why they want to develop their career here. I haven't necessarily had it where it doesn't fit into their life in some respect. But as Camilla said, if if it's going that way and they really want to create something here and they're doing everything they can and have written something really great, then, you know, why not take a look? Why not see what can be done?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Anything else to say on that before we move on? Do you think we answered that, Jane, pretty thoroughly,
Yeah,
I think?
Yeah, I think so. I think that sounds good. On kind of, can we move on to sort of related, but Welsh is separate different language script. So if there's specifically this one's about Welsh, if you're a writer who's written predominantly another language, would you like to see English language versions in a spec script, or would you be up for seeing a translation of the piece, or what would your advice be on the approach there?
I saw that question pop up and I
Yeah.
thought, oh God, I don't know how to answer that. I mean, I would have to obviously read the English language version because I don't speak. Sorry. I mean, there are Welsh language theatres producers who we could help, and I know a few. I'm sure there are lots which we could help introduce writers to. But yeah, I mean, it would have to be English language to start with. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess
This was,
I'm sorry.
I don't know whether this helps to just slightly shape it. Sorry, just to interrupt. So would you prefer to see an English language spec script and a translation alongside an invitation to the English language version that's coming up, that's going to be produced? Would you like it alongside an invitation to see it, or would you just like to be invited to the play? I think this is what this question is.
So the script as well as the invitation to see reading.
Yeah, the translation as well as the invitation to the the English language version. Sorry, I'm making this more confusing. That was meant to be helpful.
Don't worry, Jane, you're doing great.
Yeah, I would like the script as well as the invitation.
And is that a general rule? Like, do you always want, if you're invited to something, I mean, obviously the conversation might go, you're invited to something, you can't make it, but you'd like to read the script and then the script gets sent. Or do you prefer it all in one go? Do you prefer someone to say, I'm sending you a version of this script and there's a reading which I'd love you to come to?
Yeah, I usually respond if I say I really want to try and I will try and come, but can I get the script as well? So you might as well
Yeah.
once, but yeah, there's no hard and fast rules. I mean, if it looks interesting, then you can just start a dialogue, can't you?
Yeah.
I think nothing bad will come from showing the script. You certainly don't have to. But you know, if I think about if I have a few minutes free and you can just read 5 or so pages, then that's probably going to work in your favor or make things easier on our end to understand what that writer's tone is like and if it works for you.
Yeah, I suppose that's really because, obviously, if you're inviting someone to the reading, then you've got some sort of blurb or some sort of, paragraph that's really should be really selling your play. But yeah, it makes total sense, doesn't it? If you have a spare 5 minutes and you look at the first few pages and go, wow, that looks really interesting. I'm going to try and see that, I think would be like an effective sort of two-pronged attack almost.
I would probably ask, to be fair. I haven't actually seen someone invite me to something and attach their script because they're trying to press you to come to the reading and experience it for the first time. But if I can't make it, as Camilla said, I would traditionally ask.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I suppose that that then it's really worth thinking about what you're saying about your play in that invite, that it's really showing off what excites you most about your play and what, also maybe a little bit of information about why you wanted to write it. Like, is that useful?
Yeah, I love reading that.
Yeah, what inspired you, sort of thing.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that you necessarily have to put that in, but it's you're representing yourself at that point. So
yeah,
anything that feels like is distinct to you is what you're looking for. We're always looking for a voice that feels authentic, and however you communicate that be that through an invitation or a script is really exciting and important.
Yeah, brilliant. And can I just ask a boring nuts and bolts question connected with that? Is there if someone sends you a script, like PDFs, obviously, but do you ever get sent like Word docs or final draft docs and stuff? Industry, like a industry standard should be a PDF file, am I right?
Yeah, but I wouldn't ignore a writer who sent it in the wrong format.
No.
You don't get minus points.
Yeah, you don't get minus points, but I would say, yeah, I would definitely read it if it were in a document format. But I also think, why not just bring it to the best level, to the final version, well, to the best professional version that you can before you send it to an agent. Because I think, if you're at the point of approaching an agent in the first place, yeah, it should probably be in a particular format. But that being said, we've definitely signed people who haven't done that because their writing just shines through.
Yeah.
So it's not the most important thing.
No, definitely not. It's quite on my mind at the moment because I don't, because Microsoft have recently put
Or the AI thing.
the AI thing, Copilot. So like remember back in the old days where you used to be like on Word and you'd say dear sir or madam and this little paperclip would leap up and say it looks like you're writing a letter. Would you like help with that? Well, it's kind of like that, like a really kind of turbo version of that where you start writing and then this little icon comes and says, would you like to keep writing or would you like our AI companion to like help you? It's freaky, right? I mean, I'm too scared to even try it in case it writes something really good, and then I can just forget about finishing my play for September and just get AI to write it instead. So yeah, that's why it kind of came into my mind because I'm thinking about trying to find a different, format to use and yeah, and thinking about what sort of format to send things in. Great. Jane, do you want to hit us with another question?
Can I just tag on to that one because this might be an easy, quick one? Should you attach a CV as well when you're sending your first email, if you have one?
Yeah, if you have one, I'm always interested to read.
Yeah, agreed. Not necessarily, but if not a CV, then some sort of biography about what you've done, who you've met, what your background is, so that you're not a faceless name, that you can't contextualize. That is always helpful.
Great. I just want to tag a quick question onto that, if that's okay. Again, this is one that I saw that came in after 6:30 yesterday, but I thought it was it. I thought I really want to address it. Where is it? I don't know. I think it was basically something like, do you need to have formal training or a degree or have done a playwriting course to be a professional writer? And I immediately thought, no, but I'll let Camilla and Jess answer that. Or what does that mean to you, if someone's got some sort of qualification?
No, I can't think of a single one of my clients with a writing qualification.
Certainly not me.
No, I mean, ultimately, however you want to learn, most writers are self-taught. Screenwriting isn't something that's taught traditionally in our education system. And there are so many resources online, be that masterclass or I'm sure there are many others. And there are so many amazing books as well, that can help you. I'm not getting commission off of this, but Philip Shelley, who runs For Screenwriting, has written a really great book that I actually have here
Let's
called
see.
Screenwriting, The Craft and the Career. It's actually just come out.
It's massive, but it's too big.
It's massive, but you know what? It is just a fantastic tool for new screenwriters, and it breaks into, how to break into the career and all the different resources you can do if you don't want to do an MA, a master's, or you don't have the resources, or you're not sure what your next move is. There's just a lot of very resourceful information there. So I know I've gone through most of it, and it's really brilliant.
Yeah, I think it's not hard to it's like get better in sort of commas because, getting more experience, practice and like honing your craft or whatever, but it's not hard to get better as a writer, like without a formalized qualification. I think it's really important that people know that you don't need one. I always remember, every single thing that you do with your life goes into the work that you make. And I'm really glad that I didn't train formally as a writer because I like what I write now. And maybe I wouldn't so much. So yeah. I don't know if that
Can
question.
just say
Yeah,
further to that, because talking about you coming up with other writers, it is so invaluable to also share your work with people. Get as many people as you can to read your work, because it is such a solitary profession and practice, and having that back and forth, if you can curate that in whatever space you can, is super useful. I found, especially if you're coming at it from not a academic or technical place, which honestly I don't think anyone cares about, is what I've noticed. Yeah.
if those things give you confidence, then great. You need to find confidence from somewhere, but it doesn't have to be from there for sure.
Exactly.
And if also if you did a degree in something completely different, like ancient history, then that could be really useful on something that you're working on later on. And you should
Yeah.
share that information when you meet your agent for the first time, because when that show comes in about ancient Rome, they'll be like, ah, you're the perfect writer for it.
Yeah, very
It's
true.
nice to have a niche,
100%.
Yeah, great. Jane, what are we looking at time-wise? Like, how have we got lots to get through? We got bits and bobs. We've got 10 minutes. So,
We've got a few. If we do them speedily, I think we'll get through them.
okay, fantastic.
I think this one should be a fairly quick one. How often do you have contact or a check-in with your writers? On average.
it really varies. I talk to some every day. It's about,
Some leave you very long voice notes.
I get lots of voice notes from Anna. It totally varies. I think, it's a different relationship with each writer.
And apologies if it's vague to agree, but it's true. It really does vary. Some, multiple times a week, some, twice a month because they're super busy. And but the best part about that relationship is that you're always just a call away.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Best place to look for agents when you're at a junior level, if you feel like you're not necessarily going to be of interest to bigger agencies yet.
So where to look for agents that are at a junior level? Okay.
I mean, LinkedIn is great.
Oh, wow. I would never have thought of that.
It's something that we don't look towards that much because we're in the entertainment industry. It's not the biggest thing that's utilized. But everyone who works in an agency is pretty much on LinkedIn, including all the assistants, and you can see how long someone has been there. It's just about being creative with your research, I would say.
Yeah, that's great. I'd have never thought of looking on LinkedIn at all, actually. And I think the thing, sorry, Camilla, what were you going to?
I was just going to say, if a writer's written to me and they look interesting, but I don't have the bandwidth to take on anyone new, I always share with the agents who are building their lists. So you can ask if you're aiming for someone, but they don't have capacity, then say, is there anyone else in your department who you think might be a good fit, who's growing their list?
Yeah.
Totally.
We had a sorry, I know we haven't got a lot of time, but I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine. I don't think she's here, but about she'd been talking with not an agent, but with a development exec about a project for some time, but had felt really lacking in confidence about asking if that development exec wanted to take the project on. And I completely could like take it any further to develop it in a formal way. And like while I could totally empathize with feeling that insecurity about saying essentially, do you want to take this on? Do you want to pay me to develop it more, whatever? But also with like the view that I have now, having been in the industry a longer time, is like just saying to my friend, like, there's nothing wrong with asking a question. Like, to ask a question, might you be interested in investing in this a little, developing this further? Might you be interested in signing me, or could you recommend other people? Or like, can you give me any advice about other agents to approach? I think as long as you're sort of specific and personal in the questions that you're asking, like, it's no crime to ask a question. It really isn't. It doesn't cost anything, and it doesn't cost us anything to answer as well. So I think that's just maybe worth flagging. Great, Jane.
Couple of questions around these feel related. I'm going to try and combine them. How long should you wait to follow up an email to an agent if you've not had a response, or if you've had a rejection and you've got new work and you've got a new performance to invite them to? How long should you be waiting?
I'd give someone maybe a couple of weeks to respond before you chase up. And maybe just leave it there. Don't keep at it.
Yeah.
But if they say, no, that's not for me, and you have a new piece of work, then send it. Don't hold off.
Agreed.
Right. And then there's someone who has, it's kind of off the back of that, but they've said, we've been speaking lots about sort of early writers and more junior writers, again, all the wrong words for that, but someone who has got credits and who has been published with Bloomsbury and with you, and they've asked, what am I doing wrong? I'm sure they're not doing anything wrong, but what advice would you give for the person who does have credits and has been published but is kind of struggling to get that bite from an agent?
That's brilliant if you've done that all by yourself. That's really amazing. I would definitely ask for recommendations from your publisher and whoever you've worked with to get those credits. Have that personal connection and recommendation. I'm sure you've not done anything wrong. I would just keep trying.
Yeah, I guess it's like I was watching First Dates last night, and they always say, like, Fred always says, "Why are you single? Why are you single?" As though like it's really easy to get into a relationship and be in a relationship. Like,
Yeah.
you can be talent, what makes a good script or whatever is subjective, but like you can be a brilliant writer and just not have made that connection with someone that, and an agent can admire a writer, but not want to sign them because they're not what they're looking for now, or they don't connect with them. I think that it's hard, isn't it? Thinking about it, like it's a bit like dating. It's like you've just got to find the right one. There's got to be the spark, I guess.
Right.
There was a question that I did briefly answer in text, but it was about unagented writers needing help with contracting and all that sort of thing. And I just wanted to encourage writers to have a look at joining the Writers Guild. It goes on a sliding scale in terms of fees. So if you're not earning very much, you don't have to pay very much. But it's really worth it because they have a casework team who can help you with contracts and help you with disputes and any kind of worries or anything. So it's definitely worth doing that if you haven't already, because if you're not agented, it's a little bit of backup essentially as a writer.
Yeah, I've occasionally had newer writers who aren't represented say, would you mind like, is this normal for something that's been offered? And I'll be like, I'm not an expert in this, but that is not normal. Like, you need, and the union, your union, the Writers Guild will help to protect you against being taken advantage of. And I think that's really important, especially when you're dealing with your intellectual property, when you're dealing with like your ideas. And you need to kind of protect that and protect yourself, I think.
Also, I think it's that thing of what's allowed within the practice of a production company or a theatre. For example, I had a situation where a friend of mine contacted me to say, I've been told I can't come to rehearsals. Is that all right? And I was like, absolutely not. That's completely against the rules and you're not allowed to be kept from going to the rehearsals. And that was something that she didn't know because she didn't have an agent saying no, that's wrong, but also the Writers Guild. So I think, between agents and the Writers Guild, you can kind of get those answers, but also reach out to writers that have been working for a while, and like Anna and me, we're all on socials. You can ask people those kinds of questions, because we do it is a bit Wild West out there sometimes, and people do try and get away with stuff, particularly emerging writers, I think.
Definitely.
And sometimes, I don't have the time to take on a new client, but I'll always give someone advice. So,
Yeah. I was
do
going to
reach out.
say that, and then I thought maybe she'll kill me because
No, just drop me a line.
yeah,
Just
I've
say,
often connected you with people in the past who were like, they don't know about this contract or whatever, which is really generous of you, because I think it is a bit like the Wild West sometimes. Jane, I reckon we got time for one more. Are we really, have we got loads?
No, we've only got two that we've sort of touched on both of them, so it's only kind of if there's
Okay.
anything to add. But when asking for a coffee with a literary person from a production company, what kind of advice can I be asking? Because the real question is, how do I get my show made? But is that a really naive question? And how else can you approach that?
No, I think that's a great question. It's about what you're curious about, which will be different for every single writer, and what you need, whether you're coming from a different part of the UK, or whether you're in talks with an indie production company and looking to make that first commission, but having no idea how making a show actually works, or what financing means, or what a broadcaster means. And we do have that information, and if you want to have the the curtain pulled back and understand a bit more about it, by all means ask. And I think being curious always reflects really well on a writer.
That's a great piece of advice. I think that curiosity reflects well, because I think so often we just don't want to bother people. We don't want to bother people. We don't want to look like we don't know what we're talking about. And actually so much gets swept under the carpet because we don't ask the questions.
Yeah, and also nothing is a stupid question, because even us who work as agents, I don't think we grew up knowing what agenting was. I don't think anybody does. And, we really learn it as we go. So there's definitely an understanding that this isn't obvious, what all the different routes and pathways are.
Brilliant. And just what was the last one, Jane, if we can touch it
The
quick?
last one, it was sort of covered a little bit earlier on about specific agents for specific things, but this one is, I have credits in continuing drama, but I'm planning to submit a comedy pilot next time. Should I approach clients who specialize in drama, or whose clients specialize in drama or comedy?
I'd say most agents do a bit of everything. There are a few specifically focused comedy agents, but on the whole, most do both drama and comedy. So if you're writing for both, then go to those agents who represent both.
I will also say, at independent, there's a little less of a, some people might lean more towards feature writers or playwrights, but every single agent wants a diverse list, be that whichever format the writer's writing or directing, but also genre-wise. And it just means that, if there's a project going, you're not putting every single client you have up for the same project. It means you can be a bit more catered. So that's also something to bear in mind.
And actually, we're doing a bit more teamwork nowadays as well. So I sometimes partner up with other agents who may have a specific speciality. So you can sign with two agents.
Brilliant. Oh, look, this has been so informative and warm, and you've both been so generous. So thank you. Let's give a massive round of applause to Camilla and Jess. Thank you so much, Morgan. Thank you, Jane, for everything. And really, it's been just a really lovely hour and a half. So see you later, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.